There is a man who could draw the entire state of Wyoming from memory, not a rough sketch, a working map, rivers, mountain ranges, passes, distances accurate enough that it later became the official route of the Pony Express, the Union Pacific Railroad, and eventually Interstate 80. He had never held a printed map of that territory in his life. He was illiterate, and he did it by scratching lines in the dirt with a stick. His name was Jim Bridger, and he spent 20 continuous years walking and riding through the Rocky Mountain West before GPS, before compasses were common, before any of that country had ever been surveyed or named by anyone other than the Native Americans who taught him everything he knew. What Bridger carried in his head was not luck. It was a complete functional system, and it worked better than anything we carry in our pockets today. Picture this. It is the summer of 1826. A 27-year-old fur trapper named Jedidiah Smith walks out of a camp in present-day Idaho and turns south. No map, no compass, no printed guide of any kind. Ahead of him stretches the Great Basin Desert, the Mojave, the Sierra Nevada mountain range, and eventually the Pacific coast of California, roughly 1,500 miles of terrain that no American had ever crossed on foot. He arrives at Mission San Gabriel, California in November. He turns around, crosses the Sierra Nevada back east in May, traverses the entire Great Basin, and arrives at his starting point in July. Then, without stopping to rest more than a few weeks, he turns around and does it again. The air smelled of sage and horse sweat. The ground cracked under his boots in summer heat that could kill a man in 2 days without water. He navigated through all of it with nothing but what was inside his skull, and he never once got lost. So here's a question, is the question this whole video is going to answer. How? How did men like Jedidiah Smith, Jim Bridger, Kit Carson, and John Coulter move through thousands of miles of unmapped wilderness and arrive exactly where they intended to go? What system were they using? Because it was a system. It was not luck, instinct, or magic. It was a specific, teachable, learnable set of techniques, and the fact that you have never been taught them is not an accident. Before we get into it, I want to ask you something directly. When was the last time you drove somewhere unfamiliar without GPS? Take a moment to actually think about it. Could you do it right now? Could you navigate your own city from memory without your phone? Drop your answer in the comments, because what you are about to discover will completely change how you understand your brain and what it is actually capable of. Think about what we have replaced navigation with. You open an app. A voice tells you to turn left in 300 feet. You turn left. You arrive. You have no idea how you got there. You could not retrace the route tomorrow. If the signal dropped, you would be lost. That is the modern version. That is the product we have been sold. Turn-by-turn directions delivered to a small screen, telling you exactly what to do, one command at a time, so that your brain never has to build anything, remember anything, or understand where it is in space. Here is what the Mountain Man version looked like instead. Jim Bridger arrived in a new valley and spent time reading it. He noted which direction the streams were flowing. He looked at the angle of the sun. He observed which sides of the mountains held snow longest into the summer, always the north faces, always shaded. He tracked the vegetation. Cottonwoods and willows meant water nearby. Ponderosa pine meant elevation. Greasewood and salt grass meant alkali flats ahead. He watched the game trails, because elk and bison had spent thousands of years finding the easiest routes through mountain passes. He asked questions, not from books, but from people who had lived in this landscape for generations. And he stored all of it permanently in his brain. One system built something that lasted a lifetime. The other system builds nothing at all. Here is where it gets important. The navigation failure in your life is not your fault. You were not born with a broken sense of direction. You were handed a device that did the work for you, told it was better, and never given the alternative. The system decided GPS was more profitable to sell than spatial competence was to teach. The result is a population that cannot find its way without a phone signal, and a generation of young people growing up with no framework for understanding space, direction, or geography at all. You are not the problem. The replacement was. Now let us get into exactly how the mountain men did it. There were 4 core techniques, and each one built on the last. The first was watershed navigation. This was the operating system of the entire enterprise. Mountain men did not think about the West as a blank, empty space. They thought about it as a network of rivers. Every river drains a specific territory, flows in a specific direction, and eventually connects to something larger. Follow a river upstream and you climb toward a mountain pass. Follow it downstream and you descend toward a valley, a settlement, another river junction. The Missouri feeds into the Mississippi. The Green River feeds into the Colorado. The Snake feeds into the Columbia and reaches the Pacific. A man who understood how the drainages connected could navigate the entire continent like a road map, because rivers were the road map. This is how Jedidiah Smith found his way to California. He followed the Sevier River south, then the Virgin River, then used information from Mojave Indian guides to trace their ancient trade route across the desert to the coast. The routes existed. They had always existed. He just needed to know how to read them and who to ask. The second technique was landmark triangulation. Mountain men memorized the profiles of specific peaks, ridgelines, and rock formations from every approach angle. The Wind River Range, seen from the east, looks completely different from the west, but a man who had crossed it in 4 different seasons, at 3 different points, could identify his position from 30 miles away by the shape of a single summit against the sky. General Grenville Dodge, who worked with Jim Bridger extensively, wrote that Bridger could make a map of any country he had traveled through, marking its streams and mountains so clearly that there was no trouble following it. Dodge added that Bridger never once lost his bearings on plains or in mountains. Not once, in 20 years. The third technique was solar and stellar orientation. Mountain men tracked the sun's arc across the sky throughout the day to maintain a consistent sense of cardinal direction. At night, Polaris, the North Star, provided an anchor. The Big Dipper rotated around Polaris like a clock hand, and depending on the season, the Dipper pointed toward Polaris from 2 directions. Combined with moon phase and moonrise position, a trapper could orient himself on a cloudy night by memory of the sky alone. He did not need to see the stars. He needed to know where they would be if he could. The fourth technique was arguably the most powerful of all, and it is the one we talk about least. It was knowledge transfer from Native Americans. This is not a footnote to the story, it is the story. In the winter of 1823 to 1824, Jedidiah Smith was trapped by deep snow while trying to cross the Rockies. He failed, and he returned to a Crow camp in the Wind River Valley. The Crow showed him a broad, gentle passage at the southern end of the Wind River Range, a route so gradual that loaded wagons could cross it. That passage was South Pass. Historians have described it as the single most important geographical discovery in the story of American westward expansion. 400,000 immigrants used it to reach Oregon and California. Smith did not discover it. The Crow gave it to him. That distinction matters. Jim Bridger married women from the Flathead and Shoshone nations. Kit Carson's first wife was the Arapaho woman, Wa-Nibi. Jim Beckworth lived with the Crow for nearly a decade, rising to a leadership position, and later found what became the primary Sierra Nevada crossing for California-bound settlers, following a trail the Maidu people had used for centuries. One historical estimate says nearly half of mountain men married Native American women as their first wives. Those were not just personal relationships, they were the primary channel through which 10,000 years of landscape knowledge moved into the hands of European American trappers who had been in that country for months. Here is the part that should genuinely stop you. Mountain men did not just learn individual routes, they absorbed entire geographic systems, drainage networks, seasonal migration corridors, known water sources across hundreds of miles of desert, elevation changes coded through vegetation changes, and prevailing wind patterns that differed by valley and season. That knowledge had been accumulated by indigenous nations over hundreds of generations and passed forward through oral tradition, ceremony, and daily life. The mountain men tapped into the end of that pipeline, learned as much as they could in a decade or two, and then the era ended. And when it ended, the knowledge went with it. Why did this system disappear? It disappeared for the same three reasons that every old effective slow system always disappears. It took too long to learn, it required too much individual competence to scale, and a cheaper alternative arrived that seemed to make it unnecessary. The railroads surveyed their own routes using instruments and professional engineers. Printed maps became widely available after the Civil War. Automobiles arrived with roads, road signs, and eventually numbered highway systems. By the time GPS launched commercially in the 1990s, the full infrastructure of mechanical, then electronic navigation was already in place. The old system was not defeated, it was simply made to seem irrelevant, and then forgotten. The hidden cost did not appear immediately. It appeared slowly, across generations, in the form of a measurable degradation in something most people did not know they were losing. The brain's navigation hardware, the hippocampus, requires active spatial engagement to maintain itself. When that engagement stops, the tissue changes. Here is what neuroscience has confirmed. In 2000, researcher Eleanor Maguire at University College London published a landmark study in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences showing that licensed London taxi drivers had significantly enlarged posterior hippocampi compared to non-drivers, and that the enlargement correlated directly with years of experience navigating London's network of 25,000 streets. A follow-up study in 2011 tracked trainees over 3 to 4 years and found that only those who successfully qualified showed measurable growth. The intensive spatial learning was physically reshaping the brain. In 2014, the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine went to the researchers who discovered why. John O'Keefe had found place cells in the hippocampus in 1971, individual neurons that fire when you are at a specific location in space. In 2005, May Britt and Edvard Moser discovered grid cells in the adjacent entorhinal cortex, neurons that fire in precise hexagonal patterns to create an internal coordinate system. Together, the Nobel Committee said, these cells constitute a biological GPS. The brain was built to navigate. It contains dedicated hardware for exactly this function. The problem is that GPS turns this hardware off. Researcher Veronique Bobot at McGill University demonstrated that turn-by-turn navigation activates the caudate nucleus, a different structure responsible for stimulus response habit sequences, while leaving the hippocampus essentially idle. In a 2020 study published in Scientific Reports, she and her colleague found that greater lifetime GPS use correlated with measurably worse spatial memory. A 3-year longitudinal follow-up confirmed the effect was causal, not just correlated. More GPS use produced steeper decline in hippocampal-dependent navigation ability over time. The mountain men spent decades doing the exact opposite. They activated their spatial navigation hardware continuously, under life or death pressure, across enormous and varied terrain. They built hippocampi that could hold the entire Rocky Mountain West with enough precision to draw it from memory 40 years later and have it match a modern survey. Jim Bridger's mental map, drawn in the dirt in 1862, is preserved in a paper copy at the American Heritage Center at the University of Wyoming. Its features, the Continental Divide, the Bighorn Basin, the Wind River Range, the major river systems, remain clearly identifiable when compared to satellite imagery today. An illiterate man, no formal education, no instruments. The accuracy is remarkable, but it should not be remarkable. It is what the human brain can do when it is actually used. If you are finding this valuable, this is the moment to hit that like button, because what we are building toward is practical. This is not just history, this is something you can actually do. Here is where we get concrete. The easiest starting point costs nothing and takes about 20 minutes. The next time you drive somewhere you have been before, put your phone face down and navigate from memory. Not forever, just that one trip. Notice what happens in your mind. You will begin looking at the environment differently, at landmarks, turns, and the relationship between one street and another. You are reactivating dormant spatial hardware. Do this regularly, and the hardware begins to rebuild. Small exposure, consistent repetition, real improvement over weeks and months. The intermediate step is to start reading paper maps for any trip more than 30 minutes from home. Not to memorize every detail, but to build a spatial overview before you move through a space. Researchers who study navigation consistently find that map users develop better cognitive representations of their routes than GPS users, travel more efficiently in novel environments, and retain route knowledge far longer. Buy a paper road atlas. Buy a topographic map of your region. Spend 20 minutes looking at it before a long drive or a hike. The goal is to build a mental framework, a skeleton, that your experience then fills in. The advanced option is to actually practice landmark navigation the way the mountain men did. Pick a hiking trail you do not know. Study a topographic map before you go. Identify 3 to 5 landmarks, a ridge, a creek junction, a prominent peak that you will use to orient yourself as you move. Do not use GPS. Use the landmarks. Notice when you can see them. Notice when you lose them. Notice what it feels like to triangulate your position from what is visible around you rather than from a screen in your hand. This is uncomfortable the first time. It becomes natural, faster than you expect. You are training a system that has been inside your skull since before you were born. It responds quickly, and if you are not ready for any of that yet, here is the minimum. The next time you get somewhere new, before you look at your phone map, look out the window, find north, figure out which way you came from. Just that. 30 seconds of spatial orientation before you outsource it to a satellite. It is a tiny habit. It keeps something alive that is worth keeping. Jim Bridger was not extraordinary because he was born with something the rest of us lack. He was extraordinary because he spent 20 years walking through the most demanding navigational environment on the continent and paying attention every single step of the way. He was taught by people who had been paying that kind of attention for thousands of years. And he built, inside his own brain, one of the most accurate geographic representations of the American West that has ever existed without a single instrument. The knowledge was not lost. It was abandoned. It was traded for a voice and a speaker telling us to turn left in 300 feet. We are reclaiming the things that were built to last, the skills, the systems, and the knowledge that the modern world discarded but never actually improved upon. If that is the kind of investigation you want to be part of, subscribe now. You will not regret it. And tell us in the comments what skill, what old system, what piece of forgotten knowledge you want us to dig up next.